The California's Reparation Task Force has made a big decision. Last night, it held a vote on who is eligible for compensation, and the results were close. ABC 10's Monica Coleman joins us now. So, Monica, where does the group stand this morning?
Well, the 9-member task force, by a 5-4 vote, decided reparations will be limited to the descendants of enslaved people. ABC 10 spoke to Camilla Moore, chairperson of the task force, to find out why they decided to base the payments on lineage and not race. Going against the argument, all Black people, regardless of lineage, deserve reparations because of systematic racism in housing, education, and employment.
Lineage matters. When we're talking about reparations for the institution of slavery, we're talking about a particular group of people and a particular crime against humanity, that being the institution of slavery as it was enacted and constructed in the United States.
The task force also opened eligibility to freed Black people who came to the country in the 19th century due to it may be difficult to prove the bloodline of the time one was enslaved. When it comes to compensation, it could be in the form of free college, assistance buying a home, or launching businesses and grants to churches, but the task force has not voted on a concrete plan.
So, Monica, what are the next steps with this?
So, Bria, there's a lot of questions still, right? So there will be another meeting today. We'll be following up on that because the task force still needs to talk about how they are going to get reparations out to the people who are eligible and furthering this onward.
I can think of a lot of questions that come along with it, but hopefully we'll have some answers on that in the coming meetings. Monica, thank you.
What it do? This is your brother Bishop of Bishop Zone TV, and today I'm going to be discussing the state of reparations in America right now. Now, there's been a lot of talk of reparations for the past 2 to 5 years, you know, with the emergence of these closet hate groups such as ADOS and FBA, B1, and whoever else the fuck wants to join on these new acronym names. Now, I know right off the bat you're saying, oh, he's against reparations. He's a Black immigrant. I know that's the thing right now is I'm a Black immigrant. Well, one, I'm not a Black immigrant. I am what you would consider FBA, ADOS, African American, whatever the hell you want to label it. My people have been here since the 1800s and later, as far back as I can trace it. So I've been able to trace my family back to 1800s. I don't know what to tell you, but I got too much skin in the game. The bones are here. All right, they've been here for centuries. All right. Now, with that said, I am for reparations. I am very for reparations, but not at the expense of tearing down other people of African descent. Now, with that said, I'm not here to discuss those groups specifically. I'm here to address some realities of reparations because I've noticed some people in these particular groups feel like they have made progress. They feel as though the way they're going about addressing reparations and demanding reparations, that somehow people are finally listening, and that at some point we will get reparations. Now, I guess you could say there has been some progress of reparations being considered a serious thing to investigate. I guess you could say that, but I'm here to tell you, expecting white elite politicians, and when I say elite, because they're in the small minority of people that have a certain amount of wealth that the average American does not acquire. What we're doing, what a lot of our people are doing, not we, but what a lot of people are doing is they're expecting that these small minority elite white politicians, predominantly white politicians, at some point will have a moral compass and just give us reparations. They would just give us reparations. Me personally, I'm going to be realistic and say they're not going to give us reparations. Unless that's one way they might give us reparations, under one circumstances. If they've built a colony on Mars and they understand that, look, Earth only has but 20 years left until it's vamoose. So we have to get up out of here. But, we'll give these motherfuckers reparations. They can, hey, we'll be nice. They can have 20 years of prosperity before it's all vamoose, right? That's the only way I see a majority white political structure that has thrived off structural racism, that exists and perpetuates policies that have always and continues to create structural racism, actually finally give us reparations. Now, that's not me saying let's not try to give reparations. Let's not try to fight for reparations, because I know a lot of people think that way. When I say that we won't give reparations in this country, I know a lot of people right now will say that I'm pessimistic. I'm not pessimistic, I'm realistic. Again, we've been here in this country for how long? Just how long have we been here? And all of a sudden, I'm supposed to believe that it's good white folk all of a sudden. They're going to listen to us. Especially when you consider what state, by and large, Black America is in today. A lot of our people are in the most vulnerable stage. Or it's no different. The needle hasn't moved in a progressive direction since '68. Economically, financially, on an academic level. We've made some progress, and I'm talking about the descendants of those enslaved Africans. Because I know y'all like to distance Africa, but that's the reality of the situation if we're talking about reparations being owed to us due to slavery. And other instances where we were pretty much terrorized and it pushed us back financially, well after slavery. So I'm going to get into a couple of things about reparations. For one, what will reparations look like realistically as of right now? What's actually being proposed? What's the language being used in reference to reparations? Because we can actually look at this data and research these things. So, by the way, before y'all just scoff at me, I'm pretty sure Tariq has said some of these same things, right? About some of these reparations, so-called reparations. So let's start with reparations on a national level, on a federal level. Because we can go to the HR 40. Now, what is HR 40? Well, that's the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act. Now this act, it's an act of Congress in the United States introduced in 1989 by Representative John Conyers. The act aims to create a commission to examine the merits of introducing reparations to African Americans for U.S. slavery. The current iteration of the act is sponsored by Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, which is going to raise flags with people who are FBA and ADOS, because Sheila Jackson Lee, who is also a representative from Houston, Texas, where I live at, so I'm very familiar with Sheila Jackson Lee and things that she's promised and hasn't delivered on. She has a long record, long history of not really just doing anything, any tangibles, right, that benefit Black people. But she's going to get a lot of pushback because she's not a descendant of those enslaved Africans. I believe she is a descendant, or a Jamaican descendant, right? So that's people already got red flags about that, right? So also we got some other people I'm gonna tell you right off the bat who kind of suspect. I consider suspect. Just suspect politicians. You have Cory Booker. He's a sponsor of a companion bill in the Senate. Then you also have the House Speaker, the Democratic House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, who's expressed support for H.R. 40. There's also been several of the 2020 Democratic presidential candidates that have expressed their support. In April 2021, the bill cleared committee for the first time in its history, heading to the House floor for markups in the vote. That was in 2021. It's 2022. I haven't heard any new details about H.R. 40, the progress that is made, but I can guarantee you that under this administration, the Biden administration, which is a Democratic administration, overwhelmingly, that reparations is not at the top of their priority right now. As we see, they just passed a bill to aid Ukraine, right? So reparations is not on their agenda. And I think by the time of his administration, when his administration is up, it's not going to even be talked about, right? Because people will be so enamored with the war and inflation, rising gas prices, and other things of that nature to even focus on reparations. But aside from a federal and a national level, because I'm going to bring it back to the national level, we got to talk about 11 cities in America that are allegedly considering reparations, right? So I'm going to list those 11 cities. So you have Evanston, Illinois, Asheville, North Carolina, Durham, North Carolina, Tallahassee, Oklahoma, Providence, Rhode Island, Iowa City, Sacramento, California, Austin, Texas, St. Paul, Minnesota, Amherst, Massachusetts, and Kansas City, Missouri. Now, it's funny that people are talking about, especially those FBA and ADOS are talking about, or more so FBA too, are talking about trying to get reparations. But a lot of people are talking about not backing up the Democratic Party, which I agree. Black America has overwhelmingly supported the Democratic Party. But, and this is not vouching for Democrats, I just want people to be realistic. There's a pattern with these cities. There's a certain thing in common with these cities. You know what's the common trait? And it's actually more than one. These are mostly Democratic cities. Overwhelmingly Democratic cities. If you're talking about reparations and you want Congress to pass reparations so black people can progress in this country, can get what we're owed, then wouldn't it benefit you all to vote Democrats? To continue to vote overwhelmingly for the Democratic Party, who has done nothing for black people by and large, but give you symbolism, symbolic gestures. That's what the Democrats generally are good for, right? Another thing that's pretty common amongst a lot of these cities on this list is that a lot of these cities, ironically, are underwhelmingly black, which means they have a black percentage well below the national average, which the national average is about 13.1%. So 13.1%. Take a city like Austin. I'm very familiar with Austin because I'm in Texas. Austin has a black population of about 9%. 9%. How does a city that has a black population of 9%, how are we expecting them to really delve into reparations? Are we supposed to take Austin serious as a city that would do right by black people when historically and even in modern era they haven't done right by black people? I would say Austin is probably one of the worst cases of segregation in the entire state of Texas as far as major cities, because they've had plans that they've never corrected to desegregate or to further segregate and dismantle the black population. Again, we have, and look, we have, for example, the 1928 Master Plan. That was a plan that ultimately decided the fate of black Austinites, so much so to the point that we have a low percentage of black Austinites to this day. It never allowed for the black population in Austin to grow to the point where it mirrors other cities in the South. Because even though Austin is a kind of particular city, it's a peculiar city because it doesn't reflect the average Southern city. It's still considered the South. It doesn't feel like the South, but most Southern cities, they have a black population over 20%. But Austin is one of those Southern cities that has a black population well underrepresented when it comes to the black population. But Austin, let's go into it. Austin proposes a reparation plan, or reparations planning for Austin's African-American population. Now, I'm reading this article from the Austin Bulldog, right? It's a nonprofit investigative reporting in the public interest. So I just want to read this line right off the bat. This is very interesting. With Biden now in the White House and Congress contending with other legislative priorities, reparations is likely off the table for now in Washington. Did you see that? I don't want to read it again. Just know that I want y'all to take note of that. But in Austin, Texas, the dream is alive and well. So the city council on March 4th approved a resolution that advocates see as a step toward the goal of securing city funding for what they call restitution payments. Such payments are akin to financial reparations for slavery and might be implemented in similar or identical ways, but they aim to redress 20th century's wrongs rather than 19th century slavery. So this right here is showing you that they're not addressing slavery, but they're addressing 20th century wrongs, right? The resolution grows out of a reparations movement that increasingly has turned its attention to state and local government. In California, for example, and I'm gonna get to California, the state assembly passed a law last year establishing a task force to study and develop reparation proposals. In Illinois, the city of Evanston this year is scheduled to begin paying up to $25,000 each to eligible residents in the form of a housing benefit. Now, I'm just gonna say this. And you know what? Let's go down this paragraph right here. Now, while the resolution itself doesn't expressly mention reparations or restitution, it requires the city's manager to conduct a study outlining the economic value of the direct, indirect, intentional, and unintentional harm caused through economic, health, environmental, criminal, injustice, and other racial disparities in declination of resources by the city. Now, this is what quote unquote reparations looks like in Austin. What Austin is proposing. It's not reparations. They're calling it resolutions. Now, resolution is supposed to act as a type of reparation, but it's not reparations. It's not the kind of reparations you're pushing for. And that's the difference. Again, I just want to give y'all a realistic point of view of reparations, because a lot of our people are like, I'm gonna continue going with this FBA and ADOS xenophobic behavior because we're moving the trajectory towards reparations. We're actually moving the needle. You're not moving the needle. I mean, if they're acknowledging it, I guess that's moving the needle, but there's no tangibles being discussed. There's proposals, but there's nothing else to discuss, and I'm gonna tell you why later. So let's move forward. So that's Austin, Texas. Again, Austin is not, I would not move to Austin. Austin is one of the most expensive cities in Texas. It has one of the lowest percentages of black people amongst major cities in Texas. It has never addressed the 1928 city plan that removed and destroyed black communities in the state of Texas, or in the city of Austin. the average black person cannot even afford to move to Austin unless they're in tech, which I encourage more black people to get into tech. But bottom line is, Austin hasn't even addressed those particular things pertaining to the black population in the city, but now I'm supposed to believe that they're going to address reparations. Even though they're not even naming it reparations, they're naming it resolution. Okay. That's Austin. One of the other cities on that list was Kansas City. Now, Kansas City is different than Austin because Kansas City does have a significant black population. So let's go to this article, which is about NPR, right? Mayor Lucas, who's the mayor of Kansas City, signs on to test a reparations program for black Kansas Cityans. They're testing, right? So a group of 11 U.S. mayors, including Kansas City Mayor Quentin Lucas, is pledging to establish pilot reparation programs aimed at the racial wealth gap that persists in cities across the country. The group, which calls itself Mayors Organized for Reparations and Equity, more, clever, was announced Friday that the first iteration of Juneteenth as a federal holiday. Aside from Lucas, it includes Mayor Jones of St. Louis and the mayors of cities such as Denver and Los Angeles. Denver and Los Angeles are two cities that are underwhelmingly black. And St. Louis is a city that has a pretty significant black population. It has a pretty high black population, but it's also, I'm sorry to say it, but it's one of the most dangerous cities for black people to live in. I mean, it has a very, very high crime rate amongst the black population in St. Louis. So, speaking Friday, Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti said the group members have made 3 commitments: to back a bill in Congress that would establish a commission to study and develop reparation proposals across the country; 2, to create an advisory committee of black-led organizations and leaders that will help the mayors identify funding sources and craft reparation proposals; 3, to establish pilot reparation programs targeted at a cohort of black residents. Now, here's something interesting. These would vary in style and scope, and they would serve as proof of concept of this movement, Garcetti said. Cities would never have the funds to pay for reparations on our own. This is a national conversation. So let me stop right there. Again, Garcetti, the mayor of Los Angeles, said cities do not have the funds to pay for reparations on their own. So those 11 cities that are considering quote unquote reparations don't have funds to pay for reparations. They don't have the funds. It has to be a national conversation. So if it has to be a national conversation, shouldn't we go to the national? Shouldn't we go to the government to push for reparations? Shouldn't we hold off on the celebrations? Because cities, as the mayor of Los Angeles just said, and I'm in Los Angeles is in California, which a lot of people have looked at California as this sign of progress for reparations. Here you have the mayor admitting, look, we don't have the funds to pay for the reparations because we're just a city. And I'm going to assume that if the city can't pay for it, then the state can't pay for it as well. You need a national, quote unquote, conversation. It's not yet clear what a pilot program in Kansas City might look like. Lucas told KCUR that the Paycheck Protection Program, which was designed to help businesses keep their workforce employed during the pandemic, largely left out black businesses. Again, you want white people to have a moral compass, the same white people that are in positions of power that dictate how our society will be structured. You want them to have a moral compass when it comes to reparations, or you're expecting them to have a moral compass, yet here you have the mayor of Kansas City saying, look, we had a paycheck protection program and it largely left out black businesses. Because these are the people that you have to convince to give reparations to. Also, there's a paragraph with Darrell Steinberg, right? He's the mayor of Sacramento, California. Now, he said reparations should include direct compensation to people who are descendants of slaves. Cut them checks, right? But, there's more. He also argued that the function of a city is to invest directly into its neighborhoods. But again, another California city. If he's saying, look, the function of a city is to invest directly into its neighborhoods, that's basically saying like, yeah, I think, yeah, we should be cutting checks for black people, but I'm not in a position to cut those checks because that's not a city's foundation. That's not what cities do. Cities don't have the power to do that. Right? Okay. Now, so let's look at another city on the list. Tallahassee, Oklahoma, right? Now, Tallahassee is different than majority of the cities on the list because this city was in quote unquote Indian territory. Now, I'm saying quote unquote because it's called Indian. I'm trying to respect indigenous people, indigenous nations, but I'm just going by what they say on Wikipedia. Now, Tallahassee is considered the oldest of the surviving all-black towns in former Indian territory. By 1880, Creek freedmen and their descendants dominated the community population. So, reparations in that small town, that's not even a city, that's a small town. They only have a population of 106 people. And maybe 110, people estimate maybe 110. 110 black folks that were enslaved by Native Americans, enslaved by these nations at one point in time. Then they were free. That's why, hence the name freedmen. But people don't understand that for some reason. But these former enslaved Africans under Native American nations were given reparations, meaning these Native American people gave them the land back. They gave them land. They gave them land. That's no different than certain former slave masters giving newly freed enslaved people land. That wasn't uncommon. That's no different than that. That's not the kind of reparations you're asking for. Again, we're talking about the state of reparations. We're talking about reality, not optimism, but reality, not hope, not faith. You know, black folks love to have some hope and faith. I don't care if you're a Christian. I don't care if you're Pan-Africanist. I don't care if you Nation of Islam. I don't care if you're FBA, ADOS. You love you some faith. You love to follow a Messiah complex type of individual, and you love you some faith. You love you some hope. Barack Obama won black folks off the campaign of hope. Hope is dope. So, a lot of these cities, again, overwhelmingly white, liberal, Democrats. And also, I wanted to address one particular individual on Twitter because I believe he might have got me banned from Twitter because I was just spanking that motherfucker. But he has a proposal that, look, black people should vote for the Republicans. That way, because Republicans are anti-immigrant. And this is the basis of FBA and ADOS is it's not necessarily pro-reparations. Reparations is just like the cherry on top. It's largely centered around black anti-immigrants, anti-black immigrants, right? And we see right here, this cat, again, he's advocating for Republicans to get in office so they can kick out black immigrants. And so black people, at some point, we can get those reparations because for some reason, the influx of black immigrants is a conflict to reparations for black people. You know why they say that? Because when they see certain white individuals, when they see certain white individuals use continental Africans and Caribbean people as a model minority for why black people shouldn't complain about systemic racism, then that's when these simple-minded Negroes get upset, turn their finger at black immigrants instead of the actual racists, instead of the actual establishment. So let's get to the creme de la creme, California, right? California. Now, California is the only state in this country that is advocating for reparations, or so it seems, right? And a lot of people are using California as an example as to their success in pushing reparations in the forefront. But here's a problem. So California has a reparations task force, right? Now, I'm going to read it. Now, California Assembly Bill 3121 establishes the task force to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans, with a special consideration for African Americans who are descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. The purpose of the task force is 1, to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans. 2, to recommend appropriate ways to educate the California public of the task force findings. And 3, to recommend appropriate remedies in consideration of the task force findings. Okay, now y'all saw that. To study and develop reparations. So California is pushing to study and develop reparation proposals. I want y'all to keyword, the word of the day is proposals. Proposal is just that. I'm proposing to. I'm proposing. You have to agree to my proposal. I hope you can agree, right? To recommend and to recommend appropriate remedies and consideration. People, this is not the kind of reparations you think you want. These are considerations. These are proposals. These are recommendations. These are not things set in place. These are not things set in stone. These are not tangibles. There has been no tangibles discussed in this task force to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans. In this California Assembly bill, there is nothing that consists of actual tangibles for people of African descent. Enslaved Africans, I'm sorry. There's no tangibles in this bill. Only considerations, recommendations, and proposals. I'm also leery about who's in control of this task force. Because the Attorney General of California, of the state of California Department of Justice, is ahead of this reparations task force. And his name is Rob Bonta, who happens to be an immigrant. How ironic is that? So maybe it's something to that, but he's not a black immigrant. He's from Philippines. He's Filipino. Right? He's a Democrat from the Philippines, and he's ahead of this bill that's supposed to do right by black people of enslaved Africans, the descendants of enslaved Africans. How ironic is that? Rob Bonta. People, what makes you think that California is going to do right by black people? California is losing black population. They're losing a black population in large masses. The city of Los Angeles, the metropolitan of Los Angeles, at one point in time had a black population over 1 million. Now it's under 900,000. And they have a black population that's well underrepresented. Well, their black population is underwhelming, to say the least. How am I supposed to believe that California, who is losing black people in large masses to move to the South and every other place outside of the West Coast, how am I supposed to believe that they're going to do right by black Americans? How are we supposed to believe that? I guess I'm just too pessimistic, huh? Now, what could reparations look like? Because we did see some form of reparations, right? In California with Bruce Beach, right? Now, you've seen that in Manhattan Beach, right? Bruce's Beach, right? You see this article, Bruce's Beach to be returned to black family 100 years after the city used a law to steal it. Now, the California governor, Governor Newsom, apologizes for city seizure of first West Coast resort for black people, which almost certainly would have made Harris millionaires. So the governor of California, he apologized. And they said they're going to right their wrongs. They said, you know what? We're going to give this property back to their descendants, the descendants that were taken advantage of and had their property stolen by white people back in the 1920s. Ironically, that land that was stolen from them was unused for years until it was transferred to the state in 1948. So it's just been kind of sitting idle. So eventually they're going to give this land back to the descendants, which, hey, I'm glad for these descendants of the Bruce's beach. I'm all for that. I'm not like against that. I'm not pessimistic about that. I think they're going to do what they said they were going to do, but that is not necessarily reparations or the kind of reparations that you guys are looking for. And it's ironic that it happened in Manhattan Beach, that has a population of 84% white and 0.8% black, according to the city's website. I mean, this is what reparations will probably look like, which is not really tangible things that can benefit black people by and large, that can benefit black America by and large. I don't know what to tell y'all. So you want to talk about reparations, you want to talk about FBA and ADOS moving the needle for reparations and to continue going about things the way you're going about them, but it's not moving the needle. It's not resulting in tangibles. They're not even discussing tangible things. Tangibles should be at the forefront. See, there was a group that was taken way more serious called NCOBRA, which is the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. And they were founded in 1987. But see, a lot of people probably would have a problem with NCOBRA because they have chapters globally, which means, they have support through the US and in Africa, Europe, Central and South America, and the Caribbean, all in the name of giving reparations to descendants of enslaved people in America. Right? In NCOBRA. They've been on the forefront since the 80s. Right? They proposed, they did all the work. I suggest y'all go on NCOBRA's website and study who this organization is. These are credible people. NCOBRA has already did the work. They've already did the studies. These studies have been done over and over again to the point since the 80s, to the point like you don't need studies. All you need to do, all these states need to do, all these cities need to do, and what the nation needs to do is read the studies that they've done and then implement them. But again, you think it's in America's best interest to implement reparations? You know what reparations would look like to America? Think about that. What would reparations look to the rest of America? Now, me personally, I feel as though if you get reparations, then you wouldn't have to worry about crime in black communities. You wouldn't have to worry about, so-called black people begging, screaming for racial injustice, because we would have more money. We would have more wealth. And when you have wealth in this country, in a capitalist society such as America, then you have a certain type of power. And you have a certain type of influence where people will find it very difficult to discriminate against. But if the reparations were owed to us, rightfully so owed to us, the way that we seek it to be, don't you understand that that would take jobs away from black people? Don't you understand that that would take businesses away from white people that rely on black people to work these type of jobs, these lower income jobs? There will be no reason for you to work those type of jobs if you got reparations, which I'm for. You think white people are going to do that? You think the white dominant society is going to push for that? And then consider the pushback. Consider the resentment. If black people got this money, who will be the most impacted by that? Think about the aftermath of that. If black people successfully got reparations, and I'm talking about the amount that's owed to us, which we're talking about in the trillions, more than likely in the trillions, that would create not only backlash from mostly white Americans, but then that would create probably Hispanic people of indigenous ancestry, real indigenous people, to say, you know what, where's our reparations to? Matter of fact, where's our land? Then that would offset probably other African people globally to say, which rightfully so, was like, you know what, we need reparations from France. We need reparations from the United Kingdom, which, by the way, black Americans, especially if you study slavery, we're owed reparations from not just white Americans, but we're owed reparations from a plethora of different European groups. No different than the Caribbeans. No different than our Caribbean folk needing reparations. So it would offset a chain of events that would topple the power, the economic power and the wealth of the West. It would crush the West. Did I say it would crush the West? It would decimate the West. Why would they do that? Why would they transition power away from them, take power away from them and give it to us? Because the West influence, the West power, economic resources were built off of slavery. They were built off the transatlantic slave trade by and large. You can debate if it helped Europe, but colonialism definitely helped push Europe's dominance in this on a global scale. But it's not debatable about the importance of slavery as an economy to the American landscape. That's non-debatable. America wouldn't be what it is today if it wasn't for slavery. And not only slavery, but all the other policies and events that led up to dismantling black power, black influence, black wealth, generational wealth in this country. So again, I am for reparations. I would like to have discussions in chat, serious discussions. I am not for FBA, ADOS, or any of these groups that are anti-black immigrants. Realistically, if black people want reparations, they probably need to, ain't no probably about it, they need to group up with other people of African descent globally to get the ball rolling. If we think that it's a realistic possibility that we could get reparations. Me personally, I don't expect white people to have a moral compass by and large to push for reparations. They'll consider it. They'll propose. They'll recommend certain things, but tangibles, they're not advocating for tangibles. So with that said, like and subscribe. You can dislike too. Leave a comment. Hey, I'm all for a talk, all for conversations. Until next time, get at me, holla.